When my 6-year-old grandson Ethan whispered, "Don't eat the food, Grandma," during our perfect family dinner, I thought he was just being silly. I had no idea those 5 words would save my life and destroy everything I believed about the people I loved most. I thought I was the luckiest grandmother alive. Every Sunday for 3 years, my family gathered around my dinner table in Cedar Falls, Iowa, laughing and sharing stories and showing me the kind of love most 75-year-old widows only dream of. My daughter Jasmine brought me yellow roses every week, my favorites. My son-in-law Chuck fixed everything that broke in my house and called me Mom like he meant it. Little Ethan climbed into my lap and drew me pictures that covered my refrigerator like colorful wallpaper. I had no idea they were counting down the days until my funeral. That Sunday morning started like all the others have for 3 years now. I woke up at 6, excited as a child on Christmas morning. The house felt different on Sundays, warmer somehow, filled with purpose and anticipation. I shuffled to the kitchen in my old pink slippers, the ones Robert bought me 10 Christmases ago, and put on the coffee. Standing at my kitchen window, I looked out at the October morning. The maple trees in my yard were dressed in their finest fall colors, deep reds and golden yellows that reminded me of the crayon box Ethan always brought when he visited. The leaves danced in the cool breeze, and I could smell wood smoke from someone's chimney down the street. This was my favorite time of year. Robert and I used to rake leaves together every October, him complaining good-naturedly about how fast they fell, and me secretly hoping they would keep falling, so we could spend more time outside together. Now I hired the neighbor boy to do the raking, but I still loved watching those leaves dance. I pulled out my recipe cards, the same ones I had used for 40 years of marriage. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans with bacon, and apple pie. Robert always said my pot roast could bring world peace if the right people tasted it. The thought made me smile and ache at the same time. Cooking for Sunday dinner was like preparing for a celebration. I took out my good china, the white set with tiny blue flowers that had been my mother's. I polished each plate until it gleamed, arranged them just so around my old oak table. The table had hosted thousands of family meals over the years. Robert carved countless turkeys at that table. We celebrated birthdays and holidays there. We taught Jasmine her multiplication tables while she sat in the chair that was now Ethan's favorite spot. The house smelled like heaven by 10 o'clock. I had learned over the years that slow cooking was the secret to everything. Let the flavors build, let the meat get so tender it fell apart at the touch of a fork. I bustled around my yellow kitchen, humming old hymns and feeling useful in a way that made my heart light. I put on my best blue dress, the one Robert always said brought out my eyes. Even though he was gone, I still wanted to look nice for my family. I still wanted to be the grandmother they were proud of, the one who kept traditions alive and made everyone feel loved. At 11:30, I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. My heart jumped with anticipation. I smoothed my dress, checked my lipstick in the hall mirror, and waited for the sound that made every Sunday worth living for. "Grandma." The front door burst open, and Ethan's voice filled my house like sunshine. He always ran straight to me, never stopping to take off his jacket or wipe his feet. He was 6 years old and built like a string bean, all arms and legs and boundless energy. He crashed into my arms with the force of a small hurricane, wrapping his thin arms around my waist and squeezing tight. I breathed in the scent of his strawberry shampoo and felt that familiar rush of pure, uncomplicated love that only grandchildren can bring. "I missed you, Grandma," he said, his voice muffled against my dress. "I missed you too, sweet boy. It's only been a week, but it felt like forever." He pulled back and grinned at me, showing the gap where his front tooth used to be. "I have something for you." He dug into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I drew it in art class on Friday. I smoothed out the drawing carefully. 2 stick figures stood among what looked like purple flowers. One figure was tall with gray hair. One was small with dark hair. "It's you and me in your garden," Ethan explained proudly. "Those are the pretty purple flowers you showed me last summer." My breath caught a little. The foxglove plants. I had taught him about all my flowers during his visits, how some were beautiful but dangerous if you ate them. He was such a smart little boy, always remembering details that most children his age would forget. "Oh, honey, this is absolutely beautiful. We'll put it right here on the refrigerator with all your other masterpieces." "Mom says I'm getting too old for the refrigerator gallery," Ethan said, his voice suddenly quiet. "She says big boys don't need their pictures on Grandma's fridge anymore." Something sharp twisted in my chest. "Nonsense. I said firmly, probably more firmly than I meant to. A grandmother's refrigerator should always be covered with her grandson's art. That's the rule, and I make the rules in my own kitchen. Ethan's smile returned, bright as sunshine. That's what I told her. I said Grandma makes the rules at Grandma's house. That's exactly right, sweet boy. Keisha appeared in the kitchen doorway then, and my heart did its usual little flutter of joy. At 45, my daughter was still beautiful. She had kept her figure and always dressed nicely. Today she wore a soft blue sweater and dark jeans that made her look younger than her years. Her blonde hair was styled perfectly, and she carried herself with the confidence of the successful real estate agent she had become. In her arms was a bouquet of yellow roses, my favorites, though I had never told her that. Somehow she just knew. "These are for you, Mom," she said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Her perfume smelled like vanilla and flowers. I saw them at the grocery store and thought of you. Tears pricked my eyes. Every Sunday for 3 years, she had brought me flowers. Every single Sunday. "Oh, sweetheart, they're gorgeous. You didn't have to do that." "Of course I did," she said, already moving to get a vase from my cabinet. She knew where everything was in my kitchen, moved around it like she belonged there. "You do so much for us with these wonderful dinners every week. It's the least I can do." She arranged the roses in my crystal vase, the one Robert gave me for our 25th anniversary. "These Sunday dinners mean everything to us, Mom. They keep the family together. Dad would be so proud of how you've held us all together after." She didn't finish the sentence. She never did when she mentioned Robert's death. The mention of my husband made my chest tight with both sadness and pride. He had always said family was our greatest treasure, that keeping family close was the most important thing we could do in this life. Looking at Jasmine fussing over the flowers in my kitchen, at Ethan already climbing onto his favorite chair to watch me cook, I knew Robert was right. "Where's Chuck?" I asked, noticing my son-in-law hadn't come in yet. "Oh, he's outside fixing your porch light," Jasmine said, waving her hand toward the front of the house. He noticed it was flickering when we pulled up. "You know Chuck, he can't stand to see anything broken at his mother-in-law's house." I smiled. Chuck had been calling me Mom since the day he married Jasmine 15 years ago. He was a big, gentle man with hands that showed he worked for a living and an easy laugh that filled up rooms. He fit into our family like he was born to it, like God had made him specifically to love my daughter and be a father to Ethan. "That man treats this house better than some people treat their own homes," I said. "That's because he loves you, Mom," Jasmine said simply, her voice soft with affection. "We both do. More than you could ever know." Before I could respond, Chuck's voice boomed from the front hallway. "Where's my favorite mother-in-law hiding?" His footsteps thundered across my hardwood floors. He was a big man who walked like he was happy to be wherever he was. He appeared in my kitchen doorway, filling it completely with his broad shoulders. His graying hair was mussed from working outside, and his cheeks were red from the October cold. He wore his usual weekend uniform, jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. "There she is," he said, opening his arms wide. "Come here and give your favorite son-in-law a hug." I walked into his embrace, feeling small and protected in his bare hug. He smelled like Old Spice and fresh air and something indefinably masculine that reminded me of Robert. "How's my best girl doing today?" he asked, holding me at arm's length to look at me with those kind brown eyes. "Better now that my family's here," I said, meaning every single word. "Thank you for fixing the light. You don't have to take care of me, you know." "Sure I do," he said, ruffling Ethan's hair as he walked past. "That's what family does. We take care of each other." Chuck moved around my kitchen with easy familiarity, washing his hands at the sink, checking on the roast in the oven, asking what he could do to help. This was my family. These were the people who made getting old bearable, who made Sunday mornings worth waking up for. The next hour passed in a blur of comfortable activity. Chuck peeled potatoes while telling us funny stories about his work crew. Jasmine set the table with my good china, arranging everything perfectly. Ethan sat at the kitchen counter, swinging his legs and chattering about his week at school. I moved among them all, stirring and seasoning and feeling more content than I had any right to be at 75 years old. This was what happiness looked like, your family in your kitchen, everyone talking at once, the smell of good food filling the air. "Mom, you look tired," Jasmine said suddenly, appearing at my elbow with a concerned frown. "Are you feeling okay? You didn't forget to take your morning pills, did you?" I paused, trying to remember. Had I taken them? The days sometimes blurred together when you got to be my age. "I'm not sure, sweetheart." I think so, but let me check your pill organizer, she said, already reaching into her purse. Jasmine had been handling my medications for the past 6 months, ever since I got confused about which pills to take when. It was one more way she showed how much she cared. She pulled out the little plastic container with compartments for each day of the week. You missed your morning dose, she said gently. Here, take these now with some water. I swallowed the pills gratefully. Sometimes I wondered what I would do without Jasmine looking after me. The doctor had put me on so many medications after Robert died. Something for my heart, something for my blood pressure, something to help me sleep. It was hard to keep track of them all. Thank you, sweetheart. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, she said, squeezing my shoulder. I'll always take care of you, Mom. Always. Something in her voice made me look at her more closely, but she had already turned away to check on the green beans. I shook off the strange feeling and went back to my cooking. By 1 o'clock, everything was ready. The table was set with my mother's china and cloth napkins. The food was steaming hot and perfectly seasoned. My family was gathered around me, filling my house with laughter and love. This was my perfect Sunday. This was what made everything else worth enduring. I had no idea it would be the last normal moment of my life. We gathered around my old oak table like we had done every Sunday for 3 years. The afternoon light streamed through my lace curtains, casting gentle shadows across the white china and yellow roses. Chuck pulled out my chair for me. He always did that, always treated me like a lady worth respecting. Everything looks perfect, Mom, Jasmine said, admiring the spread of food. You've outdone yourself again. I beamed with pride. The pot roast was golden brown and falling apart tender. The mashed potatoes were fluffy as clouds. The green beans glistened with bacon grease. Everything was exactly as it should be. Chuck cleared his throat and reached for our hands. Shall we say grace? We joined hands around the table, my family, my treasures. Chuck's big hand engulfed mine, warm and calloused from honest work. Jasmine's was soft and smooth, her nails painted a pretty pink. Ethan's little fingers were sticky from sneaking tastes of mashed potatoes when he thought I wasn't looking. Dear Lord, Chuck began in his deep, sincere voice, we thank you for this beautiful meal prepared with love by the best cook in Iowa. We thank you for bringing us together as a family, for keeping us healthy and safe, and for blessing us with each other. Watch over our Tamika and keep her in your loving care. Amen. Amen, we echoed. I squeezed Ethan's hand before letting go, and that's when I noticed something strange. His palm was damp with sweat, and when I looked at his face, his usual bright smile was missing. Instead, he was staring down at his empty plate with an expression I had never seen on him before. Fear. Ethan, honey, are you feeling okay? I asked. He looked up at me quickly, those brown eyes wide and worried. I'm fine, Grandma. But he wasn't fine. I could see it in the way he sat stiffly in his chair, in the way his gaze kept darting between his parents and me. Something was making my happy little boy scared, and that made my grandmother instincts prickle with alarm. Let me serve everyone, I said, picking up the carving knife. Chuck, you want your usual big portion? You know I do, he said with a laugh. I've been looking forward to this all week. I carved thick slices of pot roast and piled everyone's plates high. The meat was perfect, tender enough to cut with a fork, seasoned just the way Robert used to like it. I spooned mashed potatoes and green beans, making sure everyone had plenty. Everyone except Ethan. When I moved to fill his plate, he pulled it away slightly. Not hungry, sweet boy? Maybe just a little, he whispered, but he didn't look at me when he said it. I gave him small portions, watching his face. The fear was still there, lurking behind his eyes like storm clouds gathering on a summer day. What could possibly be wrong? Had he gotten in trouble at school? Were his parents having problems? I started to serve my own plate last, as I always did. The hostess serves herself last. That was the rule my mother had taught me 50 years ago. I was reaching for the serving spoon when Ethan suddenly scooted his chair closer to mine. Grandma, he whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. What is it, honey? He leaned in close, his little mouth right next to my ear. His breath was warm and shaky, and when he spoke, the words came out in the barest whisper. Don't eat the food, Grandma. I froze, the serving spoon halfway to my plate. My heart stopped beating for just a second, then started again with a hard thump that echoed in my ears. What did you say? But Ethan had already pulled away, his eyes darting quickly to his parents before looking down at his lap. His hands were trembling. Ethan, what are you whispering about over there? Jasmine asked with a light laugh, but I caught something sharp in her voice. Are you telling Grandma secrets? Probably telling her the food looks funny, Chuck added with his easy grin, but his eyes weren't smiling. They were watching Ethan with an intensity that made my stomach clench. You know how picky kids can be about anything that's not chicken nuggets and French fries. I stared at my grandson, trying to make sense of what I had heard. Don't eat the food. Why would he say that? Why would my sweet, innocent little boy tell me not to eat the dinner I had spent all morning preparing? I'm not very hungry right now, I heard myself saying. The words came out steady, but inside I was shaking. I think I'm just too excited having everyone here. Let me watch you all eat first. Oh, Mom, your famous pot roast is getting cold, Jasmine said, and there was something in her voice I had never heard before. An edge. A sharpness. You worked so hard on this dinner. Come on, Mom, Chuck encouraged, his smile wide but his eyes still fixed on Ethan. You know we love watching you enjoy your own cooking. It's tradition. Tradition. Yes, it was tradition for me to eat first, to taste everything and make sure it was seasoned right. Every Sunday for 3 years, I had taken the first bite while they watched and praised my cooking. Every single Sunday. But not today. Today my 6-year-old grandson had looked at me with terrified eyes and whispered a warning that made no sense, but filled me with dread. I'll eat in just a minute, I said, setting the serving spoon down. Let me just watch you all enjoy it first. Keisha and Chuck exchanged a look across the table. It was quick, barely a second, but I saw it. A look of communication, of shared knowledge, of something I couldn't name but didn't like. Ethan, eat your dinner, Chuck said suddenly, his voice sharper than I had ever heard it directed at his son. Grandma worked hard to make this for us. But Ethan wasn't eating either. He was pushing food around on his plate with his fork, making little trails in the mashed potatoes, building tiny walls with his green beans. He hadn't taken a single bite. My heart started beating faster. Something was very, very wrong here. The air in my sunny kitchen felt thick and heavy, charged with a tension I didn't understand. Ethan, Jasmine said, her voice carrying that same sharp edge, eat your food. Now. Ethan looked up at his mother, and I saw his bottom lip tremble. I'm not hungry, Mama. I don't care if you're hungry or not, she snapped, and the harshness in her voice made me flinch. You will eat what Grandma cooked for you. Right now. This wasn't right. Jasmine never spoke to Ethan like that. She was patient with him, gentle, understanding when he was picky about food or tired or cranky. But now she was glaring at him with an expression that looked almost angry. Maybe he's coming down with something, I said quickly, my protective instincts kicking in. Children shouldn't eat when they're not feeling well. He's fine, Chuck said flatly. Aren't you, buddy? You're just being difficult. Ethan's eyes filled with tears, and he looked at me with such desperate pleading that it broke my heart. He was trying to tell me something, trying to communicate something he couldn't say out loud. Don't eat the food, Grandma. I looked down at my untouched plate, at the beautiful dinner I had spent all morning preparing with love and care. The pot roast that Chuck always praised. The mashed potatoes the tea Jasmine always asked for the recipe to, even though I had given it to her a dozen times. The green beans that Ethan usually gobbled up because I made them extra sweet just for him. Why was he afraid of the food? You know what? I said, standing up abruptly. I think I'll make some fresh coffee first. Anyone want coffee? Mom, sit down and eat, Jasmine said, her voice now carrying a tone of command that I had never heard from my daughter before. The food is getting cold. Just a quick cup of coffee, I said, moving toward the counter. I needed a moment to think, to figure out what was happening in my own kitchen, in my own home, with my own family. But as I reached for the coffee pot, Chuck's big hand closed around my wrist. Not gently, not like the loving son-in-law I thought I knew. Hard. Firm. Controlling. Mom, he said, and his voice was still pleasant, but there was steel underneath it now. Sit down. Eat your dinner. We're all waiting for you. I looked down at his hand on my wrist, at the white marks his fingers were leaving on my skin. I looked up into his face and saw something there that made my blood run cold. This wasn't the Chuck I knew. This wasn't the man who had called me Mom for 15 years, who had fixed my leaky faucets and raked my leaves and hugged me like I was precious to him. This was a stranger. And Jasmine was watching it all happen with eyes as cold as winter ice. Chuck, I said quietly, looking down at his hand still gripping my wrist. You're hurting me. He blinked, and suddenly the Chuck I knew was back. The pleasant smile, the concerned eyes, the gentle voice. Oh my goodness, Mom, I'm so sorry. He released my wrist immediately and stepped back. I didn't realize. I was just worried about you. You seem so nervous today. I'm fine, I said, rubbing my wrist where red marks were already forming. Just fine. But I wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. The air in my kitchen felt different now, charged with something dangerous that I couldn't name. My family was looking at me with expressions I had never seen before, impatient, calculating, cold. Mom, please just sit down and eat, Jasmine said, her voice softer now but still carrying that underlying edge. We're worried about you. You're acting so strange. Strange. I was acting strange. Not them. Not Chuck grabbing my wrist like I was a disobedient child. Not Jasmine snapping at Ethan with a harshness that made him cry. Not the way they were both watching me with eyes that didn't look loving anymore. I was the one acting strange. I sat back down at my place, my hands shaking slightly as I picked up my fork. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Ethan had just been playing some kind of game, the way 6-year-olds do. Maybe I was letting my imagination run away with me, like some foolish old woman who watched too many mystery shows on television. There we go, Chuck said warmly, settling back into his chair. Now we can all enjoy this beautiful meal together. I looked across the table at Ethan. He was still pushing food around his plate, still hadn't taken a single bite. His little face was pale, and when our eyes met, he shook his head almost imperceptibly. Don't eat it, Grandma. My fork was halfway to my mouth when the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Chuck's smile faltered for just a second. Jasmine's hand tightened around her water glass. Even Ethan looked up with something that might have been hope in his eyes. I wonder who that could be, I said, starting to stand. I'll get it, Chuck said quickly, his chair scraping against the floor as he stood. You stay here and eat, Mom. But I was already moving toward the front door, my heart pounding with something that felt like relief. Someone else was here. Someone from outside this strange, tense bubble that my kitchen had become. Through the lace curtains, I could see a familiar figure on my front porch. Harold Winters, my neighbor from across the street. He was holding a covered dish and shifting his weight from foot to foot the way he always did when he was nervous. It's just Harold, I called back to the kitchen, reaching for the door handle. Harold. Jasmine's voice was sharp. What's he doing here? I opened the door, and Harold's weathered face broke into his usual gentle smile. He was 78 years old, a widower like me, and had become one of my dearest friends since Robert died. Every few weeks, he would show up with a casserole or a pie, claiming he had made too much food for one person. Hello, Tamika, he said, holding up the covered dish. I made too much tuna noodle casserole again. Thought maybe you could use it for leftovers this week. It was a lie, of course. Harold was the worst cook in Cedar Falls, and we both knew it. But it was his way of checking on me, of making sure I was okay living alone in this big house. It was kindness disguised as practicality. Harold, how thoughtful, I said, taking the dish from him. Actually, we're just sitting down to Sunday dinner. Would you like to join us? I made plenty. I saw something flicker across his face, surprise maybe, or concern. Oh, I don't want to intrude on family time. Nonsense, I said, though I wasn't sure why I was being so insistent. Something inside me was screaming that I needed Harold to stay, needed someone else in that kitchen, needed a witness to whatever was happening at my dinner table. There's always room for one more. You know that. Behind me, I heard footsteps and Chuck appeared in the hallway. His smile was back in place, but it didn't reach his eyes. Harold, good to see you, neighbor. Chuck's voice boomed with false heartiness. Thanks for checking on Mom, but we've got everything handled here. Family dinner, you know how it is. There was something in Chuck's tone that made Harold step back slightly. Harold was a quiet man, gentle and non-confrontational, but he had lived through World War II and raised 4 children. He knew when something felt wrong. Of course, Harold said slowly, his eyes moving between Chuck and me. I just thought, Tamika, are you all right? You look a little pale. She's fine, Chuck answered before I could speak. Just tired. You know how these big Sunday dinners can wear her out. But Harold wasn't looking at Chuck anymore. He was looking at me, and I saw recognition dawn in his eyes. Something was wrong, and he could see it. Tamika, he said quietly, why don't I stay for just a few minutes? Help you serve dessert, maybe? That's really not necessary. Jasmine's voice came from behind Chuck. She had appeared in the hallway too, her face pleasant, but her eyes cold. We have everything under control. I insist, Harold said, and there was something firm in his voice now. Tamika is my dear friend, and I'd love to share a meal with her family. Before Chuck or Jasmine could protest again, I grabbed Harold's arm and pulled him toward the kitchen. Of course you'll stay. I won't take no for an answer. Back at the dinner table, the tension was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. Harold settled into Robert's old chair, the one that had sat empty for 2 years, and Chuck and Jasmine had no choice but to smile and pretend everything was normal. "This looks delicious, Tamika," Harold said, accepting the plate I fixed for him. "You always were the best cook in the neighborhood." I served him generous portions of everything: pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans. The same food that Ethan had warned me not to eat. The same food that my own family was pressuring me to consume. "Thank you, Harold. It's so nice to have company." I sat back down, my untouched plate still in front of me. Harold picked up his fork and took a large bite of pot roast. This is wonderful. Aren't you eating, Tamika?" "I was just waiting for everyone to start," I said. "Well, don't wait on my account," Harold said, taking another bite. Across the table, Chuck and Jay Assman were eating too, though I noticed they seemed to be pushing their food around more than actually consuming it. Only Harold was eating with genuine enthusiasm, praising every bite and asking for my recipe secrets. Ethan still hadn't touched his food. "Ethan, sweetheart," I said gently, "would you like me to make you a peanut butter sandwich instead?" "He'll eat what's on his plate," Chuck said sharply. "But if he's not hungry," I started. "He's fine," Jasmine interrupted. "Ethan, eat your dinner. Now." Harold looked up from his plate, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's perfect," Chuck said through gritted teeth. "Just dealing with a picky eater." But Harold was looking at Ethan now, really looking at him. At the tears in the little boy's eyes, at the way his hands were shaking, at the untouched food on his plate. "You know," Harold said thoughtfully, "when my grandson was about Ethan's age, he went through a phase where he wouldn't eat anything that looked different from what he was used to. Sometimes it's better not to force it." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Chuck's jaw tightened, and Jasmine's fingers gripped her fork so hard her knuckles went white. And then Harold took another big bite of my pot roast, chewed it slowly, and swallowed. 5 minutes later, he started to get sick. It started with Harold setting down his fork and pressing his hand to his chest. "That's odd," he said quietly, his weathered face suddenly pale. "I'm getting a bit of heartburn." I looked up from my still untouched plate, concerned. Harold never complained about anything. In all the years I'd known him, he had never so much as mentioned a headache. "Are you all right, Harold?" "I'm sure it's nothing," he said, but his voice was strained. He took a sip of water, then another. "Maybe I ate too fast." Across the table, Chuck and Jasmine exchanged another one of those looks. Quick, meaningful, loaded with something I couldn't read. But this time, instead of looking calculating, they looked worried. "Maybe you should take some antacid," Jasmine suggested, her voice carefully neutral. "Mom, do you have any Tums?" "In the bathroom medicine cabinet," I said, starting to stand. "I'll get them," Chuck said quickly, pushing back from the table. "You stay here with Harold." But Harold was getting worse. His face had gone from pale to gray, and sweat was beading on his forehead despite the cool October air coming through my kitchen window. "Tamika," he said, his voice tight with pain, I think something's wrong." Before I could respond, Harold doubled over and vomited right there at my dinner table. The beautiful meal I had spent all morning preparing was suddenly covered in bile and half-digested food. The smell was awful, but what terrified me more was the look on Harold's face, confused, frightened, like he didn't understand what was happening to his own body. "Oh my God!" I jumped up, knocking over my chair. "Harold, what's wrong? What can I do?" He tried to answer, but another wave of nausea hit him. Then his hand went to his chest again, and this time he cried out in pain. "His heart," I whispered, fear flooding through me like ice water. "Something's wrong with his heart." Keisha was on her feet now too, but instead of rushing to help Harold, she was pulling Ethan away from the table. "Don't look, baby," she said, covering his eyes with her hands. "Grandma's friend is just sick. People get sick sometimes." "I'm calling 911, I said, reaching for the phone on my kitchen counter. "Wait," Chuck said, appearing back in the doorway. He wasn't carrying any Tums. "Maybe we should just help him to the car. I can drive him to the hospital faster than waiting for an ambulance." "No," I said firmly, my finger already dialing. "He's having some kind of attack. He needs paramedics." "Mom, think about this," Jasmine said, her voice urgent. "The ambulance will take forever to get here. Chuck can have him at the hospital in 10 minutes. I stared at my daughter, not understanding why she was arguing with me about getting Harold help. He was clearly in distress, possibly having a heart attack, and she was worried about how long an ambulance might take. Harold made another sound of pain, clutching his chest and gasping for breath. That decided it for me. 911, what's your emergency? This is Tamika Thompson at 1247 Maple Street. I have a 78-year-old man who's vomiting and having chest pains. I think he's having a heart attack. Chuck's face darkened, and he started toward me. Mom, hang up the phone. I backed away from him, still holding the receiver. Don't be ridiculous. Harold needs help. Ma'am, we're dispatching an ambulance to your location, the 911 operator said in my ear. Can you tell me more about the patient's symptoms? He was eating dinner and suddenly became ill, I said, watching Chuck approach me with that same strange look I had seen earlier. He's vomiting and having severe chest pain. Mom, hang up the phone right now, Chuck said, his voice low and dangerous. I clutched the phone tighter. Why? Why don't you want me to call for help? For a moment, nobody spoke. Harold's labored breathing was the only sound in my kitchen. Ethan was crying quietly in his mother's arms. And Chuck was staring at me with an expression that made my blood turn to ice in my veins. Because, he said slowly, this wasn't supposed to happen. The words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not Harold getting sick. Harold wasn't supposed to be here at all. I looked down at my untouched plate, then at Harold, who was now slumped in Robert's chair, breathing hard and sweating. He had eaten my food. The food I was supposed to eat. The food that Ethan had warned me not to touch. Ma'am, are you still there? The 911 operator asked. Yes, I whispered into the phone. Yes, I'm here. The ambulance is 2 minutes away. Can you unlock your front door for the paramedics? I moved toward the front door like I was walking through water. Everything felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Chuck didn't try to stop me this time. Maybe he realized it was too late, that the damage was already done. Harold was supposed to be me. I fumbled with the front door lock, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. Behind me, I could hear Chuck and Jasmine talking in low, urgent voices. I couldn't make out the words, but their tone was clear. They were arguing about something, blaming each other for something. The ambulance arrived with sirens wailing and lights flashing, turning my quiet Sunday afternoon into a scene from a nightmare. 2 paramedics rushed into my kitchen, their equipment bags in hand, their faces serious and professional. What happened here? The lead paramedic asked, kneeling beside Harold. He was eating dinner and suddenly became ill, I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Vomiting, chest pain, difficulty breathing. The paramedic checked Harold's pulse and blood pressure, while his partner started in 4. Has he eaten anything unusual today? Any new medications? I looked at the table, at the beautiful dinner that was now contaminated with vomit and fear. Just Sunday dinner. Pot roast, potatoes, green beans. Same thing everyone else ate? Yes, I said. Then I looked at Ethan, still clinging to his mother, his food still untouched. Well, everyone except. Except what, ma'am? I stared at my grandson, at his terrified eyes and trembling hands. At the plate of food he had refused to eat. At the parents who had tried so hard to force him to eat it. Nothing, I whispered. Nothing different. The paramedics worked quickly, getting Harold stabilized and loaded onto a stretcher. As they wheeled him out of my house, one of them stopped to speak with me. Ma'am, we're taking him to Cedar Falls General. Are you family? No, just a friend. A good friend. We'll need someone to provide his medical history if possible. Do you know if he has any heart problems? Any allergies? I shook my head. He's always been healthy. Never complained about anything. The paramedic nodded and hurried after his partner. Within minutes, they were gone, leaving my house eerily quiet except for the sound of Ethan's quiet crying. I stood in my front doorway, watching the ambulance disappear down Maple Street. My neighbors were coming out of their houses now, drawn by the sirens and commotion. Mrs. Green from next door was walking over, her face creased with concern. Tamika, what happened? Is everything all right? Before I could answer, Chuck appeared at my side. His hand landed on my shoulder, heavy, possessive, controlling. Just a little scare, he said smoothly. Harold wasn't feeling well after dinner. Probably just ate too much. Mrs. Green looked from Chuck to me, her eyes questioning. Are you okay, Tamika? You look terrible. I'm fine, I heard myself say. Just worried about Harold. But I wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. As Mrs. Green walked back to her house and Chuck closed the front door behind us, I felt like I was trapped in my own home with people who weren't who I thought they were. People who had done something terrible. People who had meant for that something terrible to happen to me. In the kitchen, Jasmine was cleaning up the mess on the table, her movements quick and efficient. She had already cleared away Harold's plate, washing it in the sink like she was erasing evidence. "Mom, why don't you go lie down?" she suggested without looking at me. "This has been traumatic for you." "I want to go to the hospital," I said. "I want to check on Harold." "That's not a good idea," Chuck said. "You're upset, and hospitals are stressful places. He's in good hands now." "But he's my friend. He was here because of me." Chuck and Jasmine exchanged another look. This time, I was watching for it, and I saw the communication pass between them as clearly as if they had spoken aloud. They were deciding what to do with me. "Mom," Jasmine said carefully, "maybe it would be better if you didn't mention to anyone that Harold ate dinner here today." The word stopped me cold. "What? Think about it," she continued, her voice reasonable and patient like she was explaining something to a child. "If people know he got sick after eating here, they might think there was something wrong with your cooking. Your reputation could be ruined." My reputation. She was worried about my reputation as a cook while Harold was fighting for his life in an ambulance. "But the paramedics already know he was here," I said slowly. "They know he got sick here," Chuck corrected. "They don't need to know he ate anything. We could say he just stopped by to visit and suddenly felt ill." I stared at them both, these people I had loved and trusted and welcomed into my home every Sunday for 3 years. They were asking me to lie. They were asking me to cover up what had happened. They were asking me to help them hide what they had done. I said quietly, "I think I need to be alone for a while." Keisha's face softened with what looked like relief. "Of course, Mom. This has been overwhelming for all of us. We'll take Ethan home and let you rest." But as she moved to gather their things, I saw her slip something into her purse. Something small and white. My pill organizer. The one she had been managing for me for 6 months. The one that contained all my medications. The one that might contain something that wasn't medicine at all. I watched Jasmine slip my pill organizer into her purse like she had every right to take it. Like it belonged to her instead of me. Like my medications, my health, my very life were hers to control. "I'll bring this back next week," she said casually. "I need to make sure you have enough refills of everything." "I can handle my own medications," I said quietly. Keisha's smile was patient and condescending. "Mom, we both know you get confused sometimes. It's better if I take care of these things for you." Confused. She made it sound like I was losing my mind, like I couldn't be trusted to take care of myself. But I wasn't confused about what I had seen today. I wasn't confused about the fear in Ethan's eyes or the way Chuck had grabbed my wrist or the fact that Harold had nearly died eating food that was meant for me. "Come on, Ethan," Chuck said, lifting my grandson into his arms. Ethan didn't resist, but he looked back at me over his father's shoulder with those same frightened eyes. Like he wanted to tell me something, but didn't dare. "Bye, Grandma," he whispered. "Goodbye, sweet boy," I said, and something in my voice must have scared him because his eyes filled with tears again. "We'll call you later to check on you," Jasmine said, kissing my cheek. Her lips felt cold against my skin. "Try to get some rest." And then they were gone, leaving me alone in my kitchen with the lingering smell of vomit and the terrible knowledge that nothing would ever be the same again. I stood there for a long time, staring at the dinner table. The beautiful meal I had prepared with such love and care was ruined now. The plates were stacked by the sink, waiting to be washed. The pot roast sat congealing in its serving dish. Everything looked normal, like any other Sunday after my family went home. But nothing was normal. Nothing was the way it seemed. I walked over to the sink and looked at the dishes Jasmine had washed, Harold's plate, his fork and knife, his water glass. All clean now. All evidence erased. Evidence of what, exactly? I picked up the serving spoon I had been about to use when Ethan warned me. The same spoon Harold had used to serve himself seconds. I held it up to the light, looking for anything unusual, but it just looked like a normal spoon. The pot roast looked normal too. Golden brown, perfectly cooked, smelling like Sunday dinners from my childhood. I poked at it with a clean fork, examining the gravy, the vegetables, the meat itself. Everything looked exactly as it should. But Harold was in the hospital because he had eaten this food. Harold, who had been healthy and strong just an hour ago, was now fighting for his life because he had eaten from my table. I pulled out my phone and dialed Cedar Falls General Hospital. "Good afternoon, this is Tamika Thompson. A friend of mine, Harold Winters, was just brought in by ambulance. Can you tell me how he's doing?" "Let me check," the receptionist said. I could hear typing in the background. Yes, Mr. Winters is here. Are you family? No, just a close friend. He was at my house when he became ill. I'm sorry, but I can only give information to family members. You might try calling back later to speak with someone in his family. Harold didn't have any family left. His wife had died 3 years ago, and his children all lived in different states. If something happened to him, I might be the only one who cared enough to check on him. I hung up the phone and stared out my kitchen window. The October afternoon was beautiful, golden sunlight slanting through the maple trees, leaves dancing in the gentle breeze. It should have been peaceful. It should have been perfect. Instead, it felt like the world had tilted off its axis. I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed Robert and I had shared for 40 years. His picture was still on the nightstand, the same silver frame, the same gentle smile that had comforted me through 2 years of loneliness and grief. Robert, I whispered to his photograph, I think I'm in trouble. I think our daughter. I think Jasmine. But I couldn't say the words out loud. Couldn't even think them clearly. Because what I was thinking was impossible. Daughters didn't poison their mothers. Families didn't plot to murder the people who loved them most. Did they? I thought about the way Chuck had grabbed my wrist, the coldness in Jasmine's eyes, the fear on Ethan's face. I thought about how they had tried to stop me from calling 911, how they wanted me to lie about what had happened to Harold. I thought about Jasmine managing my medications for 6 months. All those pills, all those times she had handed them to me with a glass of water and a loving smile. Take your medicine, Mom. I want you to stay healthy. What if she hadn't been trying to keep me healthy at all? My hands were shaking as I opened the drawer of my nightstand. Inside was a manila folder where I kept all my important papers, my will, my insurance policies, my bank statements. I pulled out the will and spread it on the bed. I had written it 2 years ago, right after Robert died. Everything would go to Jasmine, my house, my savings account, my life insurance policy. She was my only child, my only living family besides Ethan. Of course I would leave everything to her. But how much was everything worth? I had never really thought about it before. The house was paid off and probably worth $300,000 in today's market. My savings account had about $400,000. Robert's pension and Social Security payments I hadn't needed to spend. The life insurance policy was for $500,000. Over $1 million. Jasmine would inherit over $1 million when I died. My stomach twisted into a cold knot. Was that enough money to kill for? Was that enough to make a daughter look her mother in the eye and smile while feeding her poison? The phone rang, making me jump. I looked at the caller ID Cedar Falls General Hospital. Hello, Mrs. Thompson? This is Dr. Sarah Martinez at Cedar Falls General. I understand Harold Winters is a friend of yours. Yes, is he all right? How is he? There was a pause. Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Winters is stable for now, but I need to ask you some questions. He's been poisoned. Foxglove. I thought about Ethan's drawing, the purple flowers that looked like the ones in my garden. The foxglove plants I had shown him last summer, the ones I had warned him never to touch because they were poisonous. Mrs. Thompson, are you there? Yes, I whispered. I'm here. I need to ask, did Mr. Winters eat or drink anything at your house today? The digitalis appears to have been ingested, and we need to identify the source. I closed my eyes. This was the moment. I could lie like Chuck and Jasmine wanted me to. I could protect my family and keep their secret. Or I could tell the truth and save my own life. He had dinner with us, I said quietly. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans. The same thing we all ate. Did anyone else become ill? I thought about Chuck and Jasmine pushing food around their plates, eating very little. I thought about Ethan refusing to take even one bite. I thought about my own untouched plate, still sitting on my kitchen counter. No, I said. No one else got sick. Mrs. Thompson, I need you to listen to me very carefully. If the digitalis was in the food and Mr. Winters was the only one who became ill, that suggests he was specifically targeted. This wasn't an accident. Targeted. The word sent ice through my veins. But he wasn't supposed to be there, I said without thinking. What do you mean? I realized what I had said, what I had admitted. I mean he wasn't supposed to come to dinner. He just stopped by with a casserole, and I invited him to stay. There was another pause. Mrs. Thompson, I think you should call the police. And I think you should be very careful about what you eat or drink until this is resolved. After I hung up, I sat on my bed staring at Robert's picture until the room grew dark around me. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't want to see my reflection in the windows, didn't want to face what I was becoming, a woman who suspected her own daughter of attempted murder. But as the darkness deepened, I began to understand something that chilled me to the bone. If Harold hadn't shown up today, if he hadn't eaten that food meant for me, I would be in the hospital right now. Or worse, I would be dead, and no one would have questioned it. Just a sad story about an elderly woman whose heart finally gave out during a lovely family dinner. And Jasmine would have inherited everything. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every creak of my old house made me jump. At 3 a.m, I finally called the hospital again. Mr. Winters is stable, the night nurse told me. His heart rhythm has improved, but he's not conscious yet. By morning, I had made a decision. I was going to find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I started in my basement, in the boxes of old papers I hadn't looked at in years. I found what I was looking for in a box marked Family Records 1975 to 1985. The adoption papers were yellowed with age, but the words were still clear. Baby girl Thompson, born March 15, 1980. Birth mother, Jennifer Sue Green, age 16. Adoptive parents, Robert Michael Thompson and Tamika Rose Thompson. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling. The memories came flooding back now. Jennifer Green, my 16-year-old niece who had gotten pregnant and couldn't keep the baby. Robert and I had been trying to have children for 8 years with no success. When Jennifer asked us to take her baby, it seemed like God's answer to our prayers. We had moved to Iowa right after the adoption, started fresh where no one knew our story. Jasmine grew up believing she was our natural child, and after a while, that's how it felt to us too. But Jennifer had died in a car accident when Jasmine was only 2 years old. There was no one left who knew the truth except Robert and me. And Robert had taken that secret to his grave 2 years ago. Or so I had thought. At the bottom of the box was something that made my blood run cold. A copy of my original will from 1978, with a note clipped to it in Robert's handwriting. Need to update. What happens to estate if Jasmine predeceases us? Need legal advice on biological versus adoptive rights. Robert had been worried about something about Jasmine's legal right to inherit. But why would that matter unless someone had told her she wasn't really ours? The phone rang upstairs. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Thompson? This is Detective Maria Santos with the Cedar Falls Police Department. Dr. Martinez at the hospital asked us to investigate the poisoning. I'd like to come speak with you this morning. Detective Santos arrived an hour later, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair. We sat in my living room, away from the kitchen where everything had happened. Can you walk me through yesterday's events? I told her everything. Ethan's warning, the way Chuck and Jasmine had acted when Harold got sick, how they tried to stop me from calling 911. You said your grandson warned you not to eat the food? Yes. He whispered it to me right before dinner was served. Mrs. Thompson, I need to ask you something. Do you believe someone in your family tried to poison you? Once I said it out loud, there would be no taking it back. No pretending this was all a terrible misunderstanding. Yes, I whispered. I think my daughter and son-in-law tried to kill me. The hospital found digitalis in Mr. Winters' system. That comes from foxglove plants. Do you have foxglove in your garden? Yes. My family knows about them. I taught my grandson about which flowers were dangerous last summer. We went to the kitchen, where Detective Santos bagged the leftover food as evidence. Who has access to your house? Who could have tampered with the food? Keisha and Chuck arrived early. They were in the kitchen while I was getting ready. I remembered Jasmine arranging flowers, Chuck carving the meat. They could have added something while I wasn't looking. Mrs. Thompson, I need to ask about your financial situation. I told her about the inheritance, over $1 million that would all go to Jasmine when I died. That's certainly a significant motive. Is there anything else I should know? I hesitated, then told her about the adoption papers, about how Jasmine might have recently learned the truth. If your daughter discovered she was adopted, that could be very significant. Sometimes adoptees feel they have less claim to their inheritance. It might have motivated her to act before you could change your will. After Detective Santos left, I sat surrounded by family photos, a lifetime of love and memories that might all have been built on lies. The phone rang. Jasmine's name appeared on the caller ID. Hi, Mom. How are you feeling today? I was so worried after yesterday. Her voice was warm and concerned, exactly the way it had always been. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. I thought I might come over this afternoon. Bring you some soup. Soup. More food from Jasmine. More opportunities for things to go wrong. I'm actually going to visit Harold at the hospital today. There was a pause. Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. Hospitals can be very stressful. She was trying to keep me away from Harold. Away from the one person who could confirm what had happened. I need to see him, Jasmine. Then I'll drive you. You shouldn't be driving when you're this emotional. I can drive myself. Mom, please. Let me take care of you. That's what daughters do. I'll call you later, I said and hung up. The phone rang again immediately. This time it was Chuck. Mom, Jasmine's worried about you. We think you should come stay with us for a few days. Stay with them, where they could control what I ate and drank. Where no unexpected visitors could save my life. I'm fine here, Chuck. We'd feel so much better if we could keep an eye on you. Keep an eye on me. Make sure I didn't talk to the police again. I said I'm fine. I hung up and turned off the phone. Then I got in my car and drove to the hospital, checking my rearview mirror to make sure no one was following me. Harold was awake when I got to his room. He looked pale and weak, but his eyes were clear. Tamika, he said hoarsely. I'm so glad you're all right. Harold, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. The doctor told me what happened. Someone tried to poison you, didn't they? I nodded, unable to speak. Your family, he said quietly. They did this. It wasn't a question. Harold had seen the same things I had. I think so, but I don't know how to prove it. Harold reached for my hand. Tamika, you're stronger than you think. Don't let them make you feel helpless. But what can I do? Jasmine is my daughter. Is she? Harold asked gently. Because the way she looked at you yesterday, that wasn't a daughter's love, Tamika. That was something else entirely. As I sat there holding Harold's hand, I realized he was right. Whatever game Jasmine and Chuck were playing, whatever they had planned for me, I wasn't going to be their helpless victim. I was going to fight back. 2 days later, I called Jasmine. My voice shook as I spoke. Not from fear this time, but from the effort of pretending to be the broken old woman they expected me to be. Keisha, honey, I've been thinking. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should come stay with you and Chuck for a while. I'm so confused about everything that happened with Harold. The relief in her voice was obvious. Oh, Mom, I'm so glad you called. We've been so worried about you. I'll come pick you up right now. Actually, could you and Chuck come for dinner tomorrow? One last meal in my own house before I pack up some things? I'd like to cook for you again. There was a pause. I held my breath. Are you sure you're up for cooking, Mom? After everything that's happened, it would make me feel normal again. Please, sweetheart. Let me do this one thing. Of course, Mom. We'd love that. Should we bring Ethan? My heart clenched thinking about that frightened little boy. Maybe just the adults this time. We have so much to discuss about my living arrangements. What Jasmine didn't know was that I had spent the last 2 days working with Detective Santos. The food would be tested, the house would be watched, and every word would be recorded. What she also didn't know was that I had made some phone calls of my own. The next evening, I prepared dinner with the same care I had always used. Pot roast again, it seemed fitting. But this time, I wasn't alone in my kitchen. Detective Santos was hidden in my basement with recording equipment, and 2 other officers were watching my house from unmarked cars. Chuck and Jasmine arrived at exactly 6 o'clock, bringing yellow roses as always. Mom, you look so much better, Jasmine said, hugging me tightly. I was so worried about your state of mind after Harold's accident. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I said, leading them to the kitchen. About family, about trust, about what really matters. They settled at the dinner table while I served the food. This time, I watched them carefully as they ate. They took small bites, pushed food around their plates, and kept encouraging me to eat more. This is delicious as always, Mom, Chuck said. You're such a wonderful cook. Thank you, Chuck. You know, I've been thinking about something. About trust between family members. Keisha looked up from her plate. What do you mean, Mom? Well, for instance, I've always trusted you to handle my medications. But I found something interesting when I was cleaning out the basement. I pulled out the adoption papers and set them on the table between us. The change in their faces was immediate. Jasmine went pale, and Chuck's fork clattered against his plate. Mom, where did you find those? Jasmine's voice was barely a whisper. In the basement, along with some other interesting documents. Tell me, Jasmine, how long have you known you were adopted? She stared at the papers like they were snakes. What does it matter? You raised me. You're my mother. Am I? Because lately, I've been feeling like you see me as something else entirely, like an obstacle to something you want. Chuck reached across the table and took Jasmine's hand. Mom, I think you're getting confused again. Maybe we should talk about this later. I'm not confused, Chuck. For the first time in months, I'm seeing everything very clearly. I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, where I had left something else for them to see. My will, the new one I had written 3 days ago. I've made some changes, I said, returning to the table. Everything now goes to a trust for Ethan and to charity. I've also established a foundation to help elderly people who are being abused by their own families. The silence in my kitchen was deafening. Chuck and Jasmine stared at the will, then at each other, then back at me. Mom, you can't be serious, Jasmine said finally. After everything I've done for you? After all these years of taking care of you? Taking care of me? Is that what you call slowly poisoning my food? Managing my medications so I'd be weak and confused? Planning to kill me at a family dinner? Chuck stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're having some kind of breakdown, Tamika. You're imagining things. Am I imagining Harold nearly dying from digitalis poisoning? Am I imagining the foxglove plants missing from my garden? Am I imagining the fear in my grandson's eyes when he tried to save my life? Mom, please, Jasmine said, tears streaming down her face. I love you. You're my mother. I would never hurt you. But I'm not your real mother, am I? And that's what this is really about. You found out you were adopted, and suddenly I became expendable. Keisha's tears stopped as suddenly as they had started. When she looked up at me, her eyes were cold as winter ice. You're right, she said quietly. You're not my real mother. My real mother was a 16-year-old girl who didn't want me. You just took me in like a stray cat. We loved you, I said, my heart breaking. We loved you like you were our own flesh and blood. But I wasn't, was I? And when you died, I would have gotten everything that should have gone to your real family. Everything I never really deserved. Chuck put his hand on her shoulder. Keisha stopped talking. But she couldn't stop now. Years of resentment were pouring out of her like poison. Do you know how it felt to find those papers? To learn that everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie? To realize that I was living in a house that didn't really belong to me, loving parents who weren't really mine. The house does belong to you, I said softly. You grew up here, Robert, and I wanted it to be yours. Until you decided to give it all away to strangers. She was shouting now, her face flushed with anger. Chuck was trying to quiet her, but she shook him off. We needed that money. Chuck has debts, serious debts to dangerous people. Serious debts to dangerous people. We were going to lose everything. And you were just going to live forever, weren't you? Taking your medications, staying healthy, keeping us waiting for what should have been mine years ago. So you decided to help nature along, I said. It would have been peaceful, Chuck said quietly. A little digitalis in your food each week, mixed with your heart medications. You would have just faded away, like you were getting older and weaker. No one would have questioned it. Except Ethan figured it out. Keisha's face crumpled. That boy is too smart for his own good. He saw me in your garden, saw me picking the foxglove flowers. I told him they were for a school project. But he knew they were poisonous because I taught him. And when he saw you putting them in my food, he was supposed to eat it too, Chuck said matter-of-factly. We couldn't risk him telling anyone what he had seen. The casual way he talked about poisoning a 6-year-old child made my blood run cold. These weren't the people I had loved and welcomed into my family. These were strangers wearing familiar faces. But Harold showed up, I said. That stupid old man, Jasmine spat. Everything would have been fine if he had just stayed home. Everything would have been murder. Detective Santos chose that moment to emerge from the basement, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Keisha Thompson and Charles Morrison, you're under arrest for attempted murder. The look on their faces was almost comical, shock, disbelief, then dawning realization that they had been caught. You set us up, Chuck said, staring at me as the officers put handcuffs on his wrists. I protected myself, I corrected. And I protected my real grandson from parents who were willing to poison him to cover up their crimes. As they read Jasmine and Chuck their rights, Jasmine looked at me one last time. I did love you, she whispered. Once upon a time, I really did. I know, I said sadly. That's what makes this so heartbreaking. 3 months later, I sat in a courtroom watching my adopted daughter and her husband get sentenced for attempted murder. Jasmine received 15 years. Chuck got 20 because of his prior fraud convictions. Something else I had learned about him during the investigation. Detective Santos had discovered that Chuck had a history of targeting elderly women, gaining their trust, and slowly stealing their money. Jasmine had been his partner, not just his wife. Together, they had bilked 3 other families out of their life savings before settling on me as their biggest prize. The worst part was learning that none of their love had been real. The Sunday dinners, the flowers, the calls asking about my health. It had all been part of their plan to earn my trust and inherit my money. But not everything had been fake. Ethan came to live with me after his parents' arrest. The courts decided that his grandparents' house was better for him than foster care, especially since I had set up a trust fund to ensure his future. "Grandma," he said one evening as we worked in my garden together, "why did Mama and Daddy want to hurt you?" I looked down at his serious little face, so much like Jasmine's had been at that age, and tried to find words a 6-year-old could understand. "Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices, sweet boy. Your Mama and Daddy let money become more important than love. But you still love me, right? Even though they were bad." I knelt down and pulled him into my arms. "I love you more than anything in this world, Ethan. You saved my life, and now I get to help save yours." He hugged me tight, and I smelled his strawberry shampoo and felt that familiar rush of pure, uncomplicated love. Real love. The kind that asks for nothing in return. A year later, I received a letter from the FBI. It turned out that Chuck and Jasmine's elder abuse network was much larger than anyone had realized. My case had helped them arrest 12 other people and recover over $3 million that had been stolen from elderly victims. I had started a foundation called Ethan's Voice to help other grandparents and elderly people who were being abused by their own families. We provided legal help, counseling, and most importantly, we listened when people told us they were afraid of the people who were supposed to love them most. Harold recovered completely and became one of my closest volunteers. "You saved my life too, you know," he told me one day as we prepared care packages for isolated seniors. "If I hadn't eaten that dinner, you would have died, and I would have lost the best friend I ever had." On Sundays now, I still cook big dinners. But my table is filled with different faces: Harold, the neighbors who helped during the investigation, other survivors from our support group, and always Ethan. Real family, I learned, isn't about blood or adoption papers or legal inheritance. Real family is about people who show up when you need them most, who tell you the truth even when it's hard to hear, and who love you for who you are rather than what you can give them. Last Sunday, as we said grace around my old oak table, Ethan squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'm glad I told you not to eat the food, Grandma." "Me too, sweet boy," I whispered back. "Me too." Sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Sometimes a 6-year-old's warning can save not just one life, but many lives. And sometimes when family fails you, you find out that real love has been there all along. In unexpected places, with unexpected people, creating unexpected strength you never knew you had. I thought I was the luckiest grandmother alive when I had a family that gathered around my dinner table every Sunday. Now I know I'm the luckiest grandmother alive because I learned the difference between performed love and real love. The difference, it turns out, can save your life. If you liked my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can write more stories. Thank you in advance. And what would you do in this person's place? I would love to hear your opinion, so please share it with me in the comments. I'm always curious about what you all think, and also write me where you heard this story. For more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you. With heartfelt greetings. Until next time, bye.